what's new in MySQL 5.1, which just recently came out. And there we go. So the history of MySQL 5.1, the very first release of MySQL 5.1 was November 29th, 2005, which would be 3 years ago. 3 years ago. The first release candidate was September 24th, 2007. So that's 2 years of development before they even got to a release candidate. And then a year from release candidate to general availability. Now it says November 14th, 2008. We were talking a little bit before about why is it November 14th when they said it came out December 1st or 2nd. And it's the difference between when the source code was done and when the binaries were built and tested.
Can I ask a question on that?
Of course.
How do they know the source?
The question is, how do they know that the source code is done before they test the binaries? And I think the answer to that is, if there's a problem with the binary, well, they're testing the binaries. They're just not testing it on every single system. Like when you go to the downloads page, there's tons of packages here. You know, this is just the list of servers it runs on. And so we've got, Windows X, x86, 64, Linux, non-RPM, all of Red Hat Enterprise, Linux, everything you want. All these different architectures. I don't know how many of them they actually test everything on. So the testing, I believe, refers to the binary builds and then doing the regression tests and whatever. If they find that it's not actually going to work, then they actually change the code and don't release it. So what you really want to do is go to this page, which I'll link in a blog post that I do soon with this video and everything, is the changes in release 5.1.x. So if you can see, here's the changes in 5.1.30, 14 November 2008 general availability. And we were just talking about, what happens if they have a binary and it doesn't work. That's probably what these are, these ones that say not release. Because you can go and you can look and there's a whole bunch of changes, but why didn't they release it? Well, probably because they were going to and then realized that there was something that you just couldn't release it and then released another version.
So maybe this was just mentioned before I came in, but I was reading that the founder of MySQL says people shouldn't use 5.1 yet.
Well, here's what he says. Exactly. So here's his blog post. And he says, MySQL 5.1 is now released as GA. In this blog, I will try to describe my opinions about this release and also set the right expectations for anyone trying out MySQL 5.1 GA. What should you expect? If you're using MySQL 5.1 just as a better version of 5.0 and don't plan to use any of the new features, then you're probably fine to try it out. You should, however, not put it into production without testing it fully, preferably by running it on a couple of slaves for some weeks. So basically what he's saying is, don't just randomly upgrade, test it. I don't know how this is different from any other, even a minor release, right? Because I always test it. That's kind of common sense. He also says it may even be best to wait for a couple of minor patch releases before putting 5.1 server in production. Well, sure, you don't do X.0, you wait for X.1 or X.6 or whatever. Some people have rules that after something goes general availability, they won't actually put it into production for 6 months. And some people test it ahead of time. So that's, that's nothing really new here with any kind of software, operating system, database, Apache, anything like that. Don't expect all the critical bugs you may have encountered in 5.0 to be fixed in 5.1. Even if we have fixed a big majority of the bugs from 5.0, some really critical ones still haven't been addressed. Again, not really big news. I mean, when they went from 4.1 to 5.0, right, they're still crashing bugs, from way back. So you can't fix everything, and it's a big piece of software. The crashing bugs are not going to be common. You might have an application in which they happen to be common, but certainly nothing that you probably have right now is going to necessarily, crash all the time. If you plan to use any of the new features of MySQL 5.1, regard these as if they would be beta quality. Test any usage of these features extensively for close to live scenarios before putting them on a production server. Now, this isn't necessarily anything that's always happens with every software, but it has been true with MySQL. I remember in 3.23.26 when they introduced replication, it didn't work. It didn't really work till 4.0 for where I was working. It might have worked for other people, but it just didn't work for us, and we ended up manually writing a script that would flush the logs, copy over the binary logs, and then apply them manually. And that's how we did it. So again, it's not the greatest thing in the world, but again, it's nothing new. If you're a new user trying MySQL for the first time, you should use MySQL 5.1. It's better than 5.0 community version, which has not been updated for some time. So basically, he is kind of saying don't use it, but he's also saying use it, and he's not really telling you anything that isn't kind of common sense for anyone who's in a system or database administrator of any kind. So technically, yeah, he's saying don't use it and be careful. But that's what you should do with every release. So.
Sure, but did they change their policy? They used to be releasing a new version only if all known bugs are fixed. And now he says openly there is a 300 or something.
Well,
what does it mean?
yeah, they used to have the policy of no critical bugs.
Yeah.
And MySQL, basically that was, Giuseppe wrote a blog post today where he said it was artificially ignored in 5.0, which means I think that nobody really, I don't know what he means by artificially ignored. I think that means that they didn't do it because it was released with critical bugs. But either they didn't realize they did it, or they did it but nobody said anything. I don't know what that was. With 5.1, it just wasn't feasible because the problem that 5.1 had, and one of the reasons that it took so long to be released, because they actually wanted to release it back in April. One of the reasons it took so long to release was because there weren't a lot of people using it. And a lot of people weren't using it because it wasn't released yet. So what they had a bunch of critical bugs, but they didn't know how critical they were, because some of their tests are obscure, and some of their tests don't even cover things that would be common in the real world. So, there's this trade-off, and you need a certain number of people who are using it in production or not in production, just testing it out to get those bugs. I mean, every software needs that. So they kind of didn't have that momentum, and right before they were going to release it in April, they found a couple of more critical bugs, and they were like, no, we can't. Like, really critical stuff. And they're like, we can't release it with that. So they've had, in the past couple of months, they've had a couple of times where they, were almost set to release, and they're like, well, can we do it? Whatever. So they decided, they took, they prioritized and went through all of them and said, what are the really critical bugs that we need to fix to make this go to production? And they picked 40 of them and fixed 35 of them. So I think this is one of those things, like, they didn't go into it with 0 bugs, but they went into it with 5 critical bugs, and we have customers using it in production enterprise settings, using partitioning, using some of the new features, and they haven't had too many other problems other than some of the limitations of things. So, it's one of those that if it's good for you, then use it, and if it's not good for you, then don't use it, but you have to test it to know. So, let's compare this with 5.0. So now 5.0 had its first alpha release December 22nd, 2003. And again, 2 years in development to September 22nd. So it's still 2 years in development. And then 1 month to GA. Now, why did it take a year actually? It took a year for this to go GA. It took a month for this to go GA. Well, look at the timeline. The first release of 5.1 was a month after the general availability of 5.0. There were a lot of architecture things that were happening in 5.0, a lot of bugs that they didn't even find until later that were in 5.1. So there was a lot of development that happened on 5.0, bug fixes and stuff, that then had to be put into 5.1. And they have different server teams and everything, so it's not necessarily so easy, although usually it's just apply the same patch. So, what is new in 5.1? These are the big things. Partitioning is new, and basically what it is if you've ever used a merge table, it's kind of like an automatic merge table. If you haven't used a merge table, what partitioning is different parts of the table can be stored in different places on the disk, in different file locations, but you query them just like a single table. And you can specify how to partition it. You can say, do it by this, range. You can say, do it by this function. Do it by a date function, and put all these dates together.
So you mean different rows, not different columns?
Correct. It's row-based.
Can you partition on different servers?
Can you partition on different servers? The answer is no. Because then you can't really query it like...
Or it'd be really slow.
Well, that too. I mean, you could... It's interesting. That's a good question. I wonder if you can use I don't think you can use federated tables with partitions. But that would probably be the way to do it. The real way to do that would be to use like MySQL proxy and have the function there and pick which server to go to. One of the other features is row-based replication. So up until now, the way that replication works is the master writes change statements to a binary log, and then a slave will read the binary log and then apply those statements to itself, to the slave. And so what happens is, if you've all used the MySQL binlog tool, you can actually see the statements, insert into, update, whatever. You can see those statements. And so if you are changing a lot of data, like let's say you're changing every row of the table and you say update table set foo equal to 1, and it's going to update all 1,000,000 rows. That's a very small amount of data for the change. You just have this small select statement. But it changes a lot of data. But the problem is that there are some functions that are not replication safe, and if the data is different on the slave than it is on the master, then your update statement might not really be, it's going to update everything, but if everything is different, you're going to be out of sync. So row-based replication is more like a sync, it's a data sync, more like Oracle's RMAN stuff, Oracle's standby stuff, except again with MySQL, even with row-based replication, you can still query the slave.
Have they done any comparisons to how fast their row-based replication is? I'm building servers right now to test this like next week.
Well, here's the thing. The logistics of row-based replication haven't changed. The master still writes stuff to a file, to the log file, and the slave still goes to the file and gets that information and applies it. Now, the difference is that it's just going to write binary data. I think it's 64-bit encoded stuff. So I think that it would probably be, in most cases, slower, only because you're actually dealing with the amount of data. And compared to how big an SQL statement is, you're probably, for the most part, going to have lots of data.
How does row-based replication keep transactions consistent?
How does row-based replication keep the transactions consistent? The same way statement-based does is that it puts begin and end statements in it, and it doesn't actually write to the binary log until the change is done. So let's go back to 5.1 and what's new in it. There's also a plugin API. So basically you can load and unload runtime components, not just stored procedures like you could before, or stored functions, user-defined functions, but you can do things like the EnoDB storage engine is now a plugin. They have basically, as far as I can tell, they developed it because they wanted to do something like a plug-in full-text parser. That's not actually finished yet, but the idea is that you'd be able to implement your own input filter on index text. And so basically, you would write a full-text plug-in parser, and then it would parse your data and then hand it to the MySQL full-text search, which gets the tree of words. So you could write something that indexes a PDF, or indexes a JPEG somehow and gets, kind of words out of, data, which MySQL can't get right now. So you still need to have your tables be MyISOM and all that kind of stuff because it's still using the full text search, and it has the limitations of, word length and all that kind of stuff. But it's a pretty neat idea for the, power that it has. So, part 2 of new in 5.1, the event scheduler. This is, I don't know, how many people here have something running in cron that's basically an SQL statement? Right. That's what this event scheduler is meant for. It's meant to get your passwords out of cron or out of the scripts or out of whatever. It does actually put notes in the MySQL error log, that it started and that it ran something. But even if it's successful, it'll say, oh, I started successfully. So I don't know about you guys, but we monitor our error logs, and so we've actually had to put some stuff in there like, no, ignore when it does this. Please don't page us that the event scheduler, started up successfully every hour. We don't want to know. We don't want to be paged every hour. So you can, just like cron, you can schedule a statement one time only, like an @job, or you can schedule it to recur at regular intervals, and you can't necessarily use all SQL, but you can use the same SQL queries and statements that you're allowed to use in a stored routine. So whatever limitations there, which is a lot. I mean, there's a lot of, you can use compound statements, begin and end, things like that. So you can do a lot. Events can be altered after creation, and then you can also drop them.
Can you disable them without dropping them?
You can disable them without dropping them. I believe it's called making them invalid. I think that's a mode.
There's a flag which...
Yeah.
Is event strictly SQL, or can you have a call? Yeah, or can you call out to something with the results? For instance, you get an email of something weird is happening.
No, right now it's only to SQL.
So it's strictly within the database stuff. You just want to have it automatically. But you can't get any
I think you can if you have UDF.
I was going to say, you could call a UDF to do that, but then you have to write the UDF in C to say, email me. So yeah, it is actually, I guess, different from cron, right? Because if cron fails, you can have it email you. But if it fails, it will put stuff in the error log. So,
I'm looking at more general, just talking about communication. For that matter, extract, submit this query, take the results, feed it into this other application there, let all this stuff happen automatically. Instead, so you something to that.
yeah, well, and that's really a function for an application server, not a database server. I mean, if you really want that, if you really want your database to do that kind of stuff, go by Oracle, because it's really,
James Duncan, he implemented those UDFs. You just need to, and I think he has even a script which allows you to take his UDF, but which you can use for emailing something. Mostly it works with a network package. They call it sleep or something like that. I was able to do that. It is very robust, and you can even start up through email, start up another application on another server. Very good job.
yeah. Do you know what? Does he have those online or?
Yes. Part of his stuff was at MySQL website, but part of his stuff was on his own website. If you search on Duncan, you will John or James?
John David Duncan, JDD.
Yeah. You can find it, and I was able to add it, and it was not very difficult.
So that's the event scheduler. There's also log tables, which is you can actually now log to a file or a table or both. You have a new parameter called log_output. So you do log_output equals file or equals table or equals file comma table or table comma file. And there's actually a lot of new stuff in the information schema. These two are I think, the most interesting, especially coming from 5.0 perspective. There are also new tables for the partition stuff, the plugins, the events, and files, which has to deal with partitions. But those kind of go along with, hey, there's an event scheduler, and now there's an information schema table called events. Process list is really, really, really neat, because now we can do this. Instead of like show process list, which won't really have anything. Can everybody see that? Okay. Instead of show process list, which, and you can do \G to make it a little more easy, right? I can't just say show me everything that's in sleep mode. I mean, I can if I do like, \, oh, I don't know if I can do that in Windows. Yeah, because I can't do like grep. But in Windows, you could do like \P, which changes your pager to like grep for sleep. And of course, it's an unknown command P. So now I can do select star from information schema process list.
Now you can like whatever where clause you want.
Exactly. Which is why
You have
it's...
to do the show process first to populate the table.
No, you don't have to.
Or is it always being populated up?
It's
How
always...
often is it being populated?
It's being populated when you write it. That's every information schema table does that, which
It's
is...
a virtual read-only table.
It is a virtual read-only table. It's actually called a system view, which is different from a view like a create view. And basically all it is it's just hard-coded. So you could say, where command does not equal query, for instance. And you could see that, okay, there's something in this connect has read all relay logs. There's probably a slave going on it for something. Or it's got a slave. So that's really one of the neat things, that now you can really find what you want, and you don't have to do select star, right? You can do select ID, let's see, ID state from there, and then you can say, okay, that's the one I want to kill, and then kill it. The other one is engines.
Interesting. It looks like it truncated the state.
Yeah, it does that actually. It's 64 characters, I think, that it does.
Sort of odd that we need to truncate it if it's a table, but
It truncates it up here too, so.
Is there a full process list table?
No. Nope.
it was like if you were doing it from the command line, MySQL and then show process list verbose or something, and the equipment here.
Yeah, let's see. If you do show full process list, then it will show the whole thing to update it. But, you know, that's probably good enough for the purposes of, you know, I want to kill it or do I not want to kill it. I think it would probably be way too, if it was a in-memory table, you could probably crash it with a buffer overflow if you had a really big query that you were trying to. So the other thing that you can do is you can do, say, select star from information schema.engines, which is another new one. And you get, you know, just the engine. Does it have support for it? Yes, default. You can also have no. Comment, you know, so memory is hash-based, stored in memory, useful for temporary tables. DB supports transactions. You know what I think? Actually, it also goes up here. Oh, and if it's transaction safe. Let me do this, \G. Nope, capital G. So you can see the MySQL has, you know, the server I have does have support for it. The comment is default engine as of 3.23 with great performance. But of course, it's not actually the default here. The default is DB.
What's XOP? What's XOP?
Where? Oh, XA? Yeah, XA is, can somebody explain it better than I can? Because I only have a very passing.
If you wanted to commit across multiple instances, for example, like we have an archive database and a regular database, and then we archive things and move them across. So we create a transaction that's across both, which is an XA transaction, so that it won't, so if it fails in the middle, it's not going to have done something in our production and not in the archive base.
That's different from a master slave like you were talking about.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, and this is just, does it have a support for XA, like, commands? You know, here's, you know, this is the merge table, merge MySQL. Do you have it? There's no transactions, things like that. Does anything here have save points? Yeah, DB has save points.
Yeah.
But you'll notice that 5.1 has neither Falcon nor Maria. Or you will now, since I told you. Some other new things in 5.1, part 3. I mean, this whole presentation is new in 5.1. These are kind of the big things. There's now a trigger privilege. It used to be back in 5.0 when we were all in back in the day, like yesterday, when we were all in 5.0. There was a to create triggers, you needed the super privilege, which is kind of a bad idea, right? You don't want to give out super privilege to more people than the people who need it, because, you know, then you end up getting into max connections and you can't connect because some developers had a connection for 3 days. So they put in a trigger privilege, which is really nice to have. Prepared statements can now use the query cache. They don't use it for all of the prepared statements, but there are some there are some statements in which they can actually use the query cache. There is now XPath support. This is all XML stuff. Extract value is a new function. It returns the content of a fragment of XML that matches a given XPath expression. And then update XML replaces the element selected from a fragment of XML by an XPath expression supplied by the user with a second XML fragment. So it just replaces that. So yeah, with the trigger privilege, there's actually one note that I didn't say. When you upgrade to 5.1, because you might have users who have the super privilege or created a trigger, what's going to happen is you need to run the MySQL _fix_privileges_table script, and what that will do is for every person that has the super privilege, it gives all of them also the trigger privilege. So it's not going to take away anyone's super privilege because it doesn't know why you gave them the super privilege, but it also will say, hey, this person has a super privilege, they need the trigger privilege also.
So with XPath, is there a new data type of XML, or is it just assume that any text field could be XML? And
I don't think there's a special XML. No, I know there's no special XML data type. I think you just run the expressions on text fields. So there are some new tools. MySQL Slap. I don't think MySQL Slap's actually new, but I think it's new that it's actually packaged with MySQL. So now when you download the MySQL binary, the server binary, you'll actually get MySQL Slap as well. MySQL Slap is a client. It's a tool to emulate client load, and so it's a benchmarking tool or a load testing tool, and you can use it to profile and benchmark your servers. It can simulate more than one client, all that kind of good stuff. Excuse me. MySQL upgrade is another script that again you're going to want to use when you upgrade. It basically, there's a new check table, I guess, keyword, which is check table for upgrade. And what that does is that it checks the tables. It'll check a table to say, how is the table format? Is it compatible with my format? Because there are sometimes, like InnoDB will change its version from 9 to 10. For example, let's go back here. Now, I just actually upgraded today to select add version to 5.1.30. So I could show you. I did actually reboot, so showing you the uptime won't help. But basically, I just upgraded, and I didn't actually run the MySQL upgrade script because I wanted to show you what it looks like. So if I do this, actually let me use information schema. If I do select table name, table schema, table name, and then I want engine version from tables where table schema equal not in information schema and not in MySQL. And that'll take a while because it's doing the virtual thing. And there we go. So we got a lot of random things. And you'll see some of these are null. These are views. These ones that are null have a null version. They're views. But you can see some of these are, I guess they're all version 10. Do we have any MyISM tables? Can I get a word from... Oh, there we go. Here's a MyISM table, and it's version 10. Now again, they're all the same because they're all... it's the FRM version, like the format. It's not like especially InnoDB versus MySQL. So now if I go to use Sequila, and then I do check table for upgrade, and I need to do like check table staff for upgrade. And it says OK. Now it might say you need to repair table, in which case it needs to repair the table to put the right FRM format on it. In which case it's a repair table and it could take you a very long time. So when you do upgrade, you do want to run the MySQL upgrade script. Come on. Upgrade. There we go. So now it's looking for this thing. It's running MySQL check, and it couldn't do it because it needed a password. This is me not actually reading the manual, but let's see if that works. I think it worked. So I just gave it -p root pass, which is my root password. Probably if I gave it -p nothing, it wouldn't do anything. So it ran all this stuff, and now it's running MySQL fixed privilege tables, which is what I said you had to run before. So basically, MySQL upgrade does what you need it to do, but it's pretty useful. So now everything's okay, and I'm going to scroll up and make sure. Look at this. You can't use locks with log tables, which I'm not actually logging with the table.
Do you have to do this for all table types, or is it just MyISM?
You have to do it for all table types. I mean, it looks, see, here's the MyISM stuff, and then it actually went to the Sequila, where there weren't really a lot of MyISM in Sequila. It checked every single table there.
And if you don't do this, what are you likely to see as a symptom?
Well, let's see. It depends. I mean, you can get into some weird trouble if you're like using tables that have different formats and you're joining them together and stuff. Sometimes you'll have an obvious error, like it'll say table is crashed, and you have to repair it, and the table's not really crashed. I don't know because I haven't really. I think I've only had one server where I realized I had to do this, and it was right after an upgrade, and it said table was crashed. So.
And once you've done this, presumably you can remove and put 5.0 back on and use those same tables, you're going to be screwed, right?
Yes, I believe
so.
so.
I have never upgraded tables as I've moved from, like, for example, the various releases.
Right.
I believe 5. Or even from
But I don't
5,
think.
I didn't
Yeah.
do it.
Well, let's see if it actually did anything. Oh, I don't have any history here. So we could select table name, engine version from tables where table schema in Sequila and test. So you can see there's still a version 10. So it probably actually didn't upgrade those tables. I know I had a problem when the format went from 9 to 10, but I don't even remember when that was. That could have been in a MySQL 5.0 upgrade to somewhere along the lines. But it's just one of those things. Just you got to test it on, test it on your non-production servers first to see if it is going to require an upgrade and a repair. If MySQL upgrade will do a repair table, because if you have a really big table, you don't want to sit there going, well, I'll just RPM upgrade and it'll take 5 minutes and everything will be fine. And of course, you want to back up your data beforehand. Like you said, if you need to downgrade, you're going to be screwed. That's why you back up your data beforehand and take your time and test it beforehand. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that. So MySQL check actually has this check upgrade, which is the thing that will actually check it. And then it has fixed table names and fixed DB names. Now the reason it has that is one of the new features in MySQL 5.1 is that it can accept a lot more characters for table and database names. It can accept such things as dot, which might screw up some of your scripts. It can accept such things as pound. It can accept a lot of weird characters, and what it does is it will escape it to a table. So if you make a table with pound in it, let's see if I can show this. So if I do use test, create table, pound, silly, and what we do, I'm going to escape it.
Yeah, but dot, that could mean they would have trouble parsing it unambiguously, right?
Yeah, I mean, it parses it. They've been able to.
I'm saying A.B.C could mean A.B.C, or it could mean A.B.C.
Right. Well, they had that problem before with columns too, so they figure out a way to do it.
Do you know why they this demand for adding all these characters?
I think people wanted certain characters they couldn't have, like minuses, but I don't know.
I thought the idea was to perform renaming easier. I think they used to have, the file name, table name, that one-to-one mapping.
Yeah.
And they didn't like it because they have to rely on operating system to do those things. And they didn't want that. So they created another layer, so they store the table names in another table or whatever, and they much more freely can rename these things.
Oh, God.
There's my name. Now, I told you it escaped it. So now I don't have to worry, because if you see a pound, it's a temporary table. Basically, I think the reason they did this was because it's really a big hack. Okay, tables and database names are really a big hack, because all it does is it looks on the file system for a directory, and it thinks any directories in the data directory are a database. So if you have a convenient lost and found directory because you've put it on a partition, it now thinks you have a lost and found database. Similarly, with table names, it's whatever.frm. Now you'll notice that there isn't a dot there, right? Because the dot would also screw up, file processing like that. So it's called that, and it just parses it the right way. So now it can get beyond. Now it's put a hack on top of a hack, right? It was a hack that it goes, and that's why, like on Windows, table names and database names are not case sensitive, but on Unix they are. And Mac OS they are.
Now, this is also true for column names or just for table names?
Column names were never a problem.
Okay. Well, a column name called A-B seems like it would be a problem.
You know what else seems like a problem? A column name called like date.
Yeah.
There was one day I was playing around with weird column names you could have, and I did something like select date, 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 or something like that, and it was like the buffalo, buffalo, buffalo thing, where you could just literally you can use the worst things that it just lets you do whatever. So if I use test.
What's the SQL standard allow for table names?
No clue. No clue. Does anyone know what the SQL standard allows for table names?
There's no reserved.
I suspect this was really done for Unicode purposes, what you're showing us.
I suspect it was done because somebody, it could be somebody wanted to put an NA in their table name or something, and again, it's a hack on top of it. Although if their operating system could parse it, that's another problem you have if your operating system doesn't have the same character set support.
Yeah, it just smells like this is going to cause them infinite grief down the line.
It's already caused us infinite grief because we have some scripts that, we'll do like a MySQL hot copy, and now it's got dots in the file names, and it parses dots as a separator, not as part of the file name. So
When they want to do next version of SQL comes out, and it's going to be parsing from
Anyway, that's why it's one of those big things, even though it doesn't seem like a big thing, because you're like, oh no, I use regular things in my, you're going to get one person that, puts in a table with a dot in it, and then, all your scripts will be.
They don't give you the option of turning this off.
They don't give you the option of turning this off? No, they don't. As far as I know, they
No
don't.
suggestion on that. Parameter which turns this off.
Use normal characters only.
That's right.
Don't let me shoot myself in the foot.
I don't even use any kind of reserved words. It's too much grief to have to code around stuff.
Oh my god, and it's so many people, they use reserved words, they don't even realize they're using reserved words. So if you do like create table from, and then you do something like, what did you want, like a bad column name, like, let's see, T. Wow, select. No, actually, that's when you do that, right? And then you have like a D, you said A minus B, right?
Yeah.
Oh, uh-oh, I did escape.
That's like,
No, I hit escape, which apparently is the Windows key for kill everything.
Yeah, well, it's not that important, but
Create
Escape just
table
respawn.
from int.
Oh.
And then I wanted what? I wanted bang A minus B bang. Car 1, 2. Yeah, I have to escape this. See, it's hard to do it by accident, but
You
from
probably
int.
escaped the second column also.
There you go. So now I can do select from. If I can type.
Well, you have to put a dot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be from dot from.
do it as from.
Ew.
This is an improvement.
I just hit escape. Okay. Anyway, if we do show create table, show create table escape from escape, then you can see it has this A minus B and it's escape. That's actually the escape symbol, the backtick. You can't tell on the Windows machine, but it's really the backtick. Anyway. So, a word to the wise. Make sure you know what new table names are coming in. Make sure you're checking what table names people are putting in, because people might just put a dot by accident, and then it gets into your production system, and you just got finished, getting rid of all those varchar 255s and big ints, and now you have to deal with dots and table names. So.
I'd suggest everybody emailing a suggestion, put in an option to turn it off.
Yeah.
And actually better, turn in an option to turn it off, have it off by default.
Yeah, use ASCII table names or something like that, or use,
But that should be
Alphanumeric.
that should actually be the default if they want the extended stuff.
So, that's my little. Alright, so new tool. So basically MySQL upgrade just uses MySQL check, as we saw, which does the same thing as check table for upgrade. Although check table for upgrade doesn't repair them. With fixed table names and fixed DB names, it will fix them. So it also runs MySQL fixed privilege tables. So there's also some new tool functionality. Our favorite MySQL dump tool can now do a whole bunch of things. If you're using cluster, it can now dump table spaces, but I'm not going to talk about cluster here because that's coming up later. But basically, cluster is no longer a part of the 5.1. It's now a separate product. With the -- replace here, instead of using a whole bunch of insert statements, it will use a whole bunch of replace statements. Now, what would really be cool would be use a whole bunch of insert ignore statements, but this is a step in the right direction. And there may already be MySQL dump insert ignore for all I know. Like I said, I never look at the syntax for these things. So it will now do a replace into instead of an insert into, which is really, really pretty cool.
And replace based on the primary key.
Replace is based on any primary or unique keys.
Oh, you have to tell it which one to use.
You can do replace, if you do replace into, what will happen is if there is not an existing entry, it'll add it in. If there is an existing entry, it deletes it and then adds it in again.
No, but how does it know which key? You said it's not always the primary key, it could be some other key.
Whichever key it matches. So all of the primary and unique key, because if it's a primary or unique key in the table, there can only be one.
Right.
And so you're saying replace it.
Yeah.
So if you have something that matches on both a primary and a unique key, the same record,
Yeah.
the same row, it doesn't matter, it's replacing it anyway. So hopefully it stops at the first match, but who knows. doesn't try to match it again when it already knows it needs to replace it. So dash single transaction, right now we'll put things between a begin and an end statement to be one transaction. In 5.1, what it does is it does a start transaction and then says with consistent snapshot. That's basically a, so it's, what it does is this. Start transaction star.
You spelled it.
Did I? Yes, I did. Transcation. Transcation. So bank star, this is just a comment, 40100 with consistent snapshot. And that comment means that in 401 and up, 4.0.1 and up, that's going to be fine. So instead of begin and end, it's saying start with, oh, I would have to do commit. So instead of begin and commit, I want to use begin and end. They make me do commit or rollback, right? So this means that this is okay syntax for anything in 4.0.1 and up. And it will do with consistent snapshot. So let's see. The other feature, so with -- master data, what happens is it will flush the tables. Now flush tables is a command that will replicate. So if you're doing a backup on your master and then flush tables replicates, it might end up, it's going to lock your slave, right? While your slave is waiting for all the tables to flush, waiting for queries to finish and close their handlers, it could lock up the slave. So what you really want is to say flush tables, but don't log this statement. And that's the changes that they have there. It adds this local qualifier to the flush table statement. So it prevents that statement from replicating. And let's see. The other thing that I didn't put here, no, I did. Okay, so MySQL bin log. Server ID. This is actually really cool. It will actually only extract commands from that server ID. So let's say you have like server, circular replication with 3 servers, and it has server ID 1, server ID 2, server ID 3. You could say only show me server ID 2, and extract just that, which is pretty cool. So if you know that something bad happened on one machine and you stopped replication, but you want to see if it happened already, you can now look at the binary, look at the relay logs or binary logs on that server, and get that out. Base 64 output will, let me see, I want to get this right. It prints the entries using base 64 encoding. This is really for a row-based replication thing. It's for debugging purposes only. I'm assuming it helps with debugging, but they basically say it's for debugging purposes. Don't actually apply these statements to the master. So the other thing that it can do, there's 2 more things. Verbose, so verbose mode, which is also -v. I know I skipped the dump date, but I'll go back to that. It will print out a statement in row-based replication, or even mixed replication for the row-based kinds. It will actually print out the statement, which is pretty cool. And in fact, I have a note here with the URL, so let me go there because I just want to show it to you. It prints out the statement that would correspond with, so here's the actual row-based replication data, right? So you still have this @ here's the position it's at, here's the date it happened, August 28th, 2008 at 3 p.m., server ID 1, this all should look pretty familiar, although this is different, right rows, table ID 17, flags, statement end, F, bin log. So now this is the data that it's writing. And this is actually equivalent to insert into test T, set @1 = 1, @2 = apple, whatever. So that's what that verbose does. It actually prints out the statement. If you wanted a statement for that data, that's what it prints out. Which I guess is useful for debugging purposes and kind of neat to have.
So this isn't the statement that caused that data to be written. This is just a statement that is equivalent to that little bit.
Yes, I believe that's what it is. Because it does. Otherwise, it would be statement-based replication, or it would actually be logging both at the same time. But it is pretty neat. So the other thing, dump date and skip dump date. So MySQL bin log actually dumps, it says dump completed on blah date at the end of it, which is actually really useful because you can go to the end of the bin log and say, oh, the dump was completed and that's great, and how long did it take? the problem is that, and that's if the -- comments flag is given, which it is by default. The problem with that is if you dump two identical databases and then look at the files, they're different. They have different checksums because the files are different because one has a date here and one has a date there. So if you're actually using the MySQL dump, let's say you're dumping a schema and you do a diff and now they're different. Right now, if you do a diff, you could see that the only row that's different is the one that says dump completed on. But you can actually now use the -- skip dump date to skip that. By default, it keeps dump date. So that's again, these are very kind of little changes, but if you needed that functionality, it's actually pretty cool to have. But this is why I didn't put them in the new features. This is just kind of new tool functionality. So here's some more new tool functionality. MySQL import now has a use threads option so that you can load data files in parallel using end threads. The MySQL server parameter has the service startup timeout, which does what it's MySQL.server, which is the startup script. And you could say how long to wait for the server to start. So if you don't want to wait for all those dots, or you want there to be more, you can now configure that. MySQL admin, you can set to not have a warning beep. I'm sure that's really useful for some people. There are some more important features later on. I grouped them into these groups of here's the new tool functionality. So, the MySQL.server one and the MySQL import one are pretty neat. The MySQL admin one, who cares? So some storage engine changes. BDB, unsupported in 5.1. It's gone, which is great, except if you're like me and you're really stingy. I'm not just stingy with money. I'm stingy with my memory. So, BDB automatically started up in my servers, and so I put skip BDB because it automatically allocates 8 megabytes of memory to some buffer I'm never going to use because I don't use BDB tables. So I put skip BDB in all of my things, and then I upgraded to 5.1, and it goes, I don't know what skip BDB is. So you have to take skip BDB out of your my.cnf if you want. Other than that, you should be fine. Federated. Federated is not enabled by default in 5.1. If you want it, you have to put federated into your my.cnf. Just -- federated. And have isom is removed. Sorry, no. I'm sure skip isom is also removed. It didn't actually say that in the change notes, but ISAM tables have not been a valid table type in a while.
But that's different from ISM.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Actually, does anyone know what ISM stands for?
Initial access.
Damn, I thought I was going to win a prize here. Wow, you all get books when I write one. Index sequential.
Yeah,
Exactly. Well,
Is this like an IBM thing from the 20s?
Hierarchical database. Yeah, that's.
Wow. You guys, and you said it in unison too. I'm really proud. I love my user group. All right. So they've removed that. So my ISOM is just, it's the MySQL ISOM, and Monty developed a better ISOM than ISOM. So here's some incompatible changes. Now we just listed some, but again, I just kind of grouped them together, and those were kind of like storage engine changes that may or may not be compatible. So MySQL D_safe, it only checks for MySQL D, not MySQL D-max. They actually, in the same early release that this is like 5.1.5 or something, they actually took MySQL D-max out of the binary and made it a separate binary, and then put it back in a couple releases later.
And you notice that safe MySQL D disappeared as well.
Yes, that's actually coming later, but yep, safe_MySQL D is gone. It used to be just a symlink to MySQL D_safe, but it's been deprecated since 4.0, so now it's gone. That's another problem that you may run into of hey, what happened there? But it will get rid of a lot of that confusion of what's the difference between safe MySQL D and MySQL D_safe? Nothing. Statement variables and system logs. Or system variables. Statements that refer to a system variable are now marked as unsafe, which is just a warning if you're in statement mode, where it will say, hey, this, if you do current user or something, right, select, insert into table, select current user, right? It's going to be a different user when you do it versus when the system user on the slave does it. And so it'll actually issue a warning. It still does it, but it issues a warning if you're using replication in statement mode. If you're using mixed mode, it will automatically use row-based replication. This is actually one of the reasons they actually had mixed mode on by default. in 5.1 until I think 5.1.28 or 29. And there were some customers that were using this on purpose with some of the features to say, you know, let me put in a time, but I want it to be in the time zone of the server. So instead of using now or timestamp, which gets put into it, I'm going to use sysdate. And that actually will, you know, will put the system time, which happens to be the time server. That's not a replication safe thing. Similarly, system variables, you know, they might be different. So if you do have any, that's kind of a hack though, and if you're doing it, you probably know about it, or if your developers are doing it, your developers know about it. So that's definitely something that you wouldn't be using by accident, but that's something that really, that it actually, enough people were using it in advanced ways like that, that they just changed it back to the default being statement mode, because that's what everybody's in now, which, you know, kind of makes sense. You know, don't mess with the default of replication. You know, yeah, mixed mode is probably better for most people. And what mixed mode with row-based replication will do is, you know, as you said, you know, is going to be faster or slower. If you do mixed mode, it will kind of calculate which is faster, which is slower, and put in, you know, which is better. So yeah, there's also a change in how MySQL handles prepared statements, and you may need to upgrade your client library. If anyone's interested in that, that's all I have here in my notes. I do have a URL that I can go to because I didn't really feel like explaining it all. But basically, a change has been made to the way the server handles prepared statements. Changes to metadata of tables are viewed in a prepared statement because the server crashed when the statement was next executed. Now the metadata changes to tables or views referred to by prepared statements are detected and cause automatic re-preparation of the statement. So you take a prepared statement and you re-prepare it. This might cause, so first of all, the re-preparation is automatic, but when it occurs, performance of prepared statements is diminished. And then incompatibility with previous versions that a prepared statement may now return a different set of columns or different types from one execution to the next. For example, if the prepared statement is select star from T1, altering T1 to contain a different number of columns causes the next execution to return a number of columns different from the previous executions, which is what might break your older versions of the client library. Some new things. Configuration file changes. Here, you know, it's kind of an incompatible change. Table cache is now called table open cache. There's a reason for that, which we'll get to later, because there's another table cache statements like table defined cache or something. And I probably should have put it in this section, but I didn't. So table cache is now called table open cache, which means if you've specified table cache in your my.cnf, you now have to change it to table open cache. The temp table size default changed.
Increased.
It actually decreased. Here's the thing. The default value of temp table size is 32 megs in 5.0. Max heap table size default is 16 megs. So it's completely useless to have a 32 meg temp table size because your heap, you know, it's going to take the smallest of the two of them when it then goes to write your temporary table to disk. So they should be the same, and it's probably better to, since temp table size is effectively 16 megabytes, they changed it to actually be the default of 16 megabytes. So basically, you don't have anything to worry about no matter what, unless you specifically have, you know, done something like looked at your variables and hard-coded all of them into your my.cnf going, okay, what are they now? I'm just going to put them all into my.cnf. Because pretty much, and even if you did that, I mean, you're limited to 16 megs anyway. You know, if you're max heap, you're limited to whatever the minimum is anyway of the two. So, but here's a stupid one. Well, I think it's stupid. Max connections, the default has changed. The default is now 100. They've now changed it to 151. Does anyone know why they would change it to 151? Besides the obvious 150 connections for something plus 1.
Is symmetrical? Is it prime?
Is it what? Is it prime? Well, no, it is specifically 150 connections plus 1 more. Okay. Yeah, well, plus 1 administrator. Apparently, the maximum number of Apache processes is determined by the max client variable, which defaults to 256, but apparently, according to the MySQL manual, usually is set to 150 in the HTTP.conf. So they've now changed max connections. First of all, I would have changed it to at least 257, because if the default is 256, I don't know. It's just, it seems silly to me because, you know, we've all run into that error of like, oh, max connections, oh, I can't believe I didn't change it from the default of 10 or 100 or whatever it was. And it just seems like if you're going to make it user-friendly, you should make it user-friendly enough that if somebody keeps the default, on MySQL, aren't they going to keep the default on Apache Max Client too? The value goes up to 100,000. Although before 5.1.15, don't ask me what it was in 5.1. I guess 5.1 to 15 and 16, it was still 16.384. I don't know what the limit was. Nobody knows what the limit is right now in 5.0. I guess I don't know.
For 4 gigs, I didn't have any problems at all.
One thing you can do for a server that's been running for a long time is you can do show status, actually show global status like max used connections. And this is one, but it shows you from the lifetime of the server how many the maximum you have used is. So you have it set to 12,000, but if you look at it, it says max connections 100. You might say, okay, I'm going to limit it to 250. That way, like.
It's not 12,000, it's 1,200.
1,200, whatever. But you might decide to limit it based on that, or you might say, hey, it's 1,200, but the max connections is 1,000. Let me increase that. Yeah, I mean, the problem is, of course, you want to have a balance. You want to get the right number right away, and you know, you would rather have users not be able to use the database than to have the users not be able to use the database and the potential for corrupting your tables. So ideally, the conservative thing to do would be to make it too low to start, like, you know, be conservative, and then, okay, you hit max connections, and now increase it a little, increase it a little. Alrighty. More configuration files. Have_RAID is removed. Again, deprecated for a while. Master-% is deprecated. This is what people used to use. I don't know why. But they would put instead of a change master statement on your slave, they would put like -- master host equal blah, -- master password equal blah in their my.cnf, which just really doesn't work. First of all, you're now putting a password into your my.cnf, which, okay, granted, MySQL does put it in plain text into the master.info file, but it's protected by the MySQL user. But you also are putting, you know, the SSL certificates. You're putting all that stuff in a text file, and it's just not a good idea. Especially since your masters might change, you know, and you might not realize it, and bad idea. So I don't know if I hadn't even heard of this when I started reading up on this, but there used to be, I guess, a -- thread. Now they have -- thread handling. So you could say -- thread handling equals 1 thread. I guess they're actually getting into this whole, hey, people might be using more than 1 thread concept. Yeah, or 8-core, or, you know. I mean, well, not this laptop, but I have a newer laptop that has dual-core Intel. Alright, configuration file changes. You can set the host name now. So you basically set, you know, host name in your my.cnf host name equal blah, and the server will set this variable to the server host name. Configuration file changes error logging. So not just logging to tables, it will actually log to syslog. By default, it actually does skip syslog. Again, they actually tried to start, in an earlier version of 5.1, they did syslog by default, and then decided that was a bad idea. So the default is to use skip syslog, and basically you can use those instead of log error. So now you can log it not just to a table or a file, you can now log it to syslog, which is pretty neat. And then you have the syslog tag. So if you do have syslog logging on, it will tag it with MySQLD_safe and MySQLD. If you want the tag to be different, it will be MySQLD-tag and MySQLD-safe-tag. That might be useful for multiple instances, for instance. You know, why might you use that if you still have to have safe_MySQLD and MySQLD, you know, prepended to the tag that you put. You know, if you have multiple instances, you can do that. Or if you have a centralized syslogging, then you might want to specify that this came from this host name and that came from that host name, so that your centralized syslogging can really be the place where you see all the MySQL error logs and you don't have to go to your 10 different machines. And the enodb log archdir parameter has been removed. It's been deprecated since 5.0.24. So if you're on a somewhat recent version, then you shouldn't have a problem with it. You might still have it in your config. But again, if it won't start up after you upgrade and it won't start because of that, then you say, take it out. Some new parameters, table definition cache. I was talking about this before. The table definition cache is the number of definitions that can be stored in the definition cache. If you have a whole bunch of tables, you can create a really big definition cache, and that speeds up opening tables because the definition's already in there. It takes up less space than the table cache, and it uses fewer file descriptors than table_cache, which is now called table_open_cache. The minimum and the default for the table definition cache is 256, and the max is 524,288, which is a completely random number, as far as I could tell. MyISOM use mmap. This is a parameter that you can use memory mapping for reading and writing MyISOM tables. It's off by default. It's false by default.
So they map the files on the memory. Files means tables.
Yeah. So maybe useful, may not be useful. It's off by default, which makes sense because currently you don't have it at all. So the binlog format, you can now have statement row or mixed. And the binlog row event max size, which gives you the maximum size of a row-based replication binlog event. Kind of like max live packet, but different because it's specifically for row-based stuff. And statement row and mixed, you can actually do binlog format equals 1, 2, or 3. If you really, really, really hate your database administrator, you could say like binlog format equals 3, and they would have to know that that means mixed. Don't do that to your DBAs. We don't like that. So, max prepared statement count. This is a global variable, and it limits the number of prepared statements in the server. This is useful because you could have theoretically like some kind of denial of service attack because somebody could run the server out of memory by running tons of statements, of prepared statements. There's actually a prepared statement count global status variable, which shows you the current number of prepared statements. And you can see that through show global status. And let's see, enodb stats on metadata. What this is it's enabled by default, which it is actually the same action as it is now, which basically means when you do something like a show table status or a show index, it updates the statistics. Things like com show. If you disable it, and this is for enodb, right? Obviously, enodb won't actually update that data, and disabling the variable can improve access speed for when you're dealing with a large number of tables or indexes, and it can also make the execution plan on enodb queries faster and more stable. Again, kind of sounds like one or two really important companies had a problem, and so they fixed it. Most people, I don't know, most people I don't think would have this problem. I don't think many people really care whether or not their statistics are updated or not, but I don't know. So, MySQL has a great new parameter called old. Now, we've all have been bitten by MySQL naming their parameters with really dumb names. The best part about this was I went through each of the 31 different change logs from 5.1.1 to 5.1.31, which they're on 30 now, but there's 31. I went through all of those, and it's a lot of information. When I first wrote this, the parameter was called old_mode. So early on they called it old mode, and I'm like, that's really dumb. Because what it does is it just says, oh, we added this variable to cause the server to revert to certain behaviors that were present in older versions. Right now, it only affects the way index hints work. Okay, fine. So basically, they did what they usually do when we don't like it when they do that. We thought this kind of behavior was done with them, which was, we're going to make this kind of hack, and we might want to kind of overload this hack, so we're going to leave it for a while. So instead of calling it something like old index hints, they just called it old mode, and then they switched the name to old. Because it wasn't ambiguous enough, I guess. So, yeah. I mean, old passwords is bad enough, right? Yeah, thank you.
So what
Old.
values can it take?
No, it's just whether it's on or off.
So, okay. So not like old equals index, comma.
No, that would be another way to do it, right? Yeah. No. Right. Moving on. Skip write bin log. Basically, this is a parameter that is mostly used because MySQL check has a -- write option, write bin log option. And when MySQL check does things like analyze, optimize, and repair tables, those statements replicate. And so in order to not have automatic replication of analyze, optimize, and repair table statements only when you use MySQL check, they have now put this skip write bin log in there. I believe that that's a command line option for MySQL check because you can set SQL log bin equal to 0, even on, if I do this, set SQL, I think it's log bin, it might be bin log, equal to 0 as a session variable. Okay. So there, now it won't binary log anything I do in this session. But you have to have the super user privilege to do that. So my point is that you already have this on command line if you have the super privilege. So now they're using it for MySQL check, so that it won't do that. So plugins. So there's an interesting thing with plugins is that now they've done this thing to say, hey, there might be ambiguities in variable names because some plugins might have the same names as other, plugin variables might have the same names as other plugin variables. So instead of something like enodb buffer pool size, now you can do plugin enodb buffer pool size, which is now the preferred way to do it. It'll still accept both ways until they, deprecate it and remove it. The other thing that you can do is you can do like, plugin enodb instead of enodb to enable it. You can do skip plugin enodb to disable it. Another thing you can do is you could do loose skip enodb. And basically what loose does is if you want it not to error if it doesn't have it, if the setting the parameter fails, it's kind of like ignore for the my.cnf. So if you say loose skip enodb, then even if you can't skip it because it's your default table type, it will still go on. It will just probably produce a warning or whatever. MySQL has always been pretty loose. Now they're just admitting it, I guess. New parameters, part 4. By the way, we're 18 slides into a 30-slide deck, so I'm going to try to move this a little faster since we all want to get home before midnight. Slave exec mode. This is mostly for a row-based replication, or at least it's an error that came up with row-based replication. And basically, you can use it with any, with any slave, whether it's row-based or not. And basically, it's used when you're error checking or doing replication conflict resolution, is what it says in the manual. And you can have strict or something called idempotent, which I don't know what it is, but looks fun. And basically, idempotent mode causes suppression of some errors, including duplicate key errors and no key found errors. Okay. Beginning with 5.1.24, this mode should be employed in multi-master replication, circular replication, and some other special replication scenarios. Strict mode is the default and is suitable for most other cases. So, fascinating. Uptime since flush status seconds is a number of seconds since you've last done a flush status. It was actually provided by Jeremy Cole a long time ago, and his patches are finally getting in because they kind of had a code freeze. -- report %. So basically, there are new read-only global system variables. So show global variables like report host, report password, report port, report user. So if let's just do this, it'll be easier. Show global variables like report %. I can actually also do select star from information schema dot global underscore variables where variable name equals report %. I have this all in my head. I should write a book on this or something. And empty set because I did something wrong.
Like where variable.
Oh, thank you. I should get you to proof read my book. So there you have it, and it's basically report host, user, password, port options, and there you go. It reports what the port is. New features. Rename database. Oh, I see. I must not have seen that. It was found to be dangerous and removes in 501.23. It was intended to enable upgrading pre-5.1 to use the encoding implemented in 5.1 for that stupid hack we were talking about before, about the different, you could put pound and bang and whatever. However, use of the statement could result in loss of database contents, which is why it was removed. To perform the task.
If it's there, don't use it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it was taken out in 5.1.23, but, well, that's annoying.
Yeah.
Too bad, it's not like
And
it.
renaming databases is a very common thing to do. A lot of people ask for that. That's why they introduced it first.
Yeah, but no, that's not why they introduced it. According to this, they introduced it so they didn't have to do alter database, upgrade data directory name.
But they did have some
It's
requests.
saying that it's dangerous, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, why would it be
Because
dangerous?
just make it do that. They don't do statements.
Exactly, exactly. Why not just show all the tables and, it's not that hard to select, let's see, concat, alter table thing. That's what I end up doing is you show me all the tables, go to the information schema, show me all the tables in this database and concatenate it with alter table, whatever, copy and paste that into a script and run it, and I'm done. And I could probably do it with an event too. So I don't know why they couldn't do it that way, but well, I'm changing that in my notes. So we no longer have a renamed database, and that's not my fault. However, we do have meaningful stack traces.
They got rid of those too.
No, they didn't get rid of those. And you can also now specify charset on command line, which basically means that you can type charset name or \c name. So I can do charset Latin 1, charset UTF-8, or I could do \C Latin 1. It's not a compiled character set. Well, that's funny because you accepted it up there. Oh, there we go. Oh, I don't need that. I don't need the semicolon. Thought the semicolon was part of charset. So Latin 1 semicolon is a valid charset name. So, and basically this is because I guess you would have to reconnect if you changed the character set before. Don't know why that wouldn't normally work, but there you go. So, new features. You can do a show authors, which shows lots of people who, were authors of the book, and you get to see where they are, just so that if you really wanted to know that, Lars Thalman lives in Stockholm, and here's, Monty, and of course, probably way up at the top is,
That's important.
yeah, you have Brian and David at the top. Monty ripped it out.
But wouldn't it be better if it were in an information schema and you could query it for everyone in a computer?
You can go write that information schema plugin. No, well, wouldn't it be great if you could just add yourself to it? And then you've also got, so another one that you have is actually show contributors. And look, there I am. There's only 3 people there, and that's me, because I donated at an auction to the Electronic Freedom Foundation. So there you go, me, Ronald Bradford, and Mark Shuttleworth. So there you go.
So how long are you going to be in there for?
I'm for the rest of the life of MySQL.
Really?
Yeah. So that's show contributors. There's also a show profile, which will actually show you profiles of queries. If you do show profiles, I think I have profiling turned on. Show profile for query, limit, whatever. And so you can have all block. I mean, it is actually really, really neat. And again, if you use it, it's going to add a little overhead to your queries and things like that. But
Yeah, just see if you set profiling equals 1, turn it on.
Yeah.
yeah, okay, I'll do
By
that.
default, it's off.
I'll do that.
Is it showing, what's it showing? Performance information? Or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's time
Right.
on specific
Yeah.
section of the query.
Well, now it's got 34 rows because it does the last 15 queries. So you can see here's query ID 2, sequence 17, state cleaning up, duration. Here's the state, it's logging a slow query. it took, 5 probably microseconds.
It means that it used to be on,
Closing
but it
table.
didn't show,
Right.
because they remember the old queries.
Select sleep 5. Four, 5. Okay. If we do show profile for query 3. Ah, sweet. I think that's that. So yeah, starting, opening table, system lock, table lock.
That's what.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. And then you can do some things and whatever if you look at the limit 5. You've got the duration. You can add the duration and everything. So query ID. So where query ID query _ ID equals 5, and I don't want star. I want, let's see, SEQ state duration. I think that's about it. What's that? Oh no, you know what? It goes here. Ha ha ha. Context voluntary. No, that's messages received or page fault. Okay. So yeah, you get the same thing. So now I can do sum of the duration. And actually group by query ID. And there we go. So it's actually query ID 4, I think, was my 5-second sleep query. So query ID equals 4. And I get all that. 4. There we go. So the user sleep. There you go. User sleep was 4. Oh, it wasn't even 5 seconds. Oh man. But it's actually a pretty good estimate, right? Because it's actually 5.4 seconds. It's actually 5.5 seconds. And it didn't even sleep for a whole 5 seconds. The starting took, the starting took a long time because, my computer's slow. So, moving right along. We're on slide 20 to 30. We're getting there. So, show profiling. Again, Jeremy Cole. Again, a very, very, very useful patch. Important bug fixes. Black hole transactions. A rolled back transaction in a black hole table used to be written to the binary log. Rolled back, no binary log. Bad. Now it's actually transaction safe. Full text search and apostrophes. Now when you do a full text search, it will actually make apostrophes match things. So for instance, the word Jerry will now match Jerry's, like Ben and Jerry's. Works particularly well if you're using language like, say, French, where, L apostrophe is in front of pretty much everything. So now we'll match that because it's kind of like the apostrophe S, it's just used for everything. So now things will match that. The information schema uses a little less memory. They've patched it to change some data structures for cleanup. If you are actually upgrading your version of the full text search stuff, for full text tables, you actually have to do a repair table quick for your full text tables. I believe that the MySQL upgrade will take care of that because, again, it does all the checking and repairing you need. So yeah, the information schema uses less memory because they cleaned up some data structures. The replicate % table options were not actually evaluated correctly when you were replicating multi-table updates. So it would update like the first row it got to on a multi-table update and then stop. So basically, let's see, as a result of this fix, replication of multi-table updates no longer fails when an update references missing table, but it doesn't update its columns. So if there's a table missing, even if it doesn't update the columns, now that'll work. Didn't work before, apparently. Again, that would be a pretty important bug if you had it, and they've fixed it. New functionalities. Faster alter table. This is the really, really cool things for some commands. So the faster alter table, operations that only change table metadata, like adding a new column at the end, or adding a new index, or dropping an index, not dropping a column, unfortunately. Those are all performed online, and all it does is change the .frm.
Also adding an additional value on an enum as well.
Adding an additional value on an
Well, no, we
enum.
get nailed on all
Yeah,
online.
but only at the end of the enum.
Yes, I understand.
Yep.
Because where I am, we had a very large table. We wanted to drop one foreign key. We thought that would be really fast, and it wasn't.
No, no. I don't know about foreign keys.
I don't quite know why that would be, because dropping a foreign key should just mean, well, you don't have this constraint. It shouldn't actually be changing anything. Right, but dropping.
No, but the foreign key is not the index. It's not like a primary unique key. It doesn't. You have to make the index separate from that.
Right, but I'm not sure why dropping the foreign key should take any time.
Especially if we leave the index in place.
Yeah. Huh.
It's still the index.
Well, if the drop index is an online thing,
We just something that surprised us recently.
even a drop index should be, right? Because a drop index is just get rid of this table structure that used to be your B-tree index.
Oh, but if you drop in the foreign key constraint, there's just a constraint.
Right, and that's what he's saying. The RAND can now take non-constant initializers. Apparently, constant initializers are initialized once when the query is compiled. Before 5.0.13, non-constant initializers, they just weren't allowed to be defined. No, they were allowed to be defined, but they didn't really mean anything. They just accepted them. After 5.0.13, they were not accepted. Right. So in 5.1, non-constant initializers are accepted, but the seed is initialized each time for the RAND, each time RAND happens, for non-constant ones. And just as a side note, RAND is actually replication safe, because it will save the seed that it used. And archive supports auto-increment, which is pretty neat. The archive storage engine only supports one index per table. And if you had an auto-increment on a table, you actually had to get rid, you had to alter the table and get rid of the auto-increment. You could keep the primary key index, but only one. You can only keep one index. So now it actually will deal with auto-increments, which is kind of neat, because what do you usually use an archive table for? For logging things, and you want to be able to have kind of row numbers. If only to prove that you're not missing any row numbers. All right, part 2. MySQL now escapes identifiers. We talked about that earlier with the silly table names. So now it escaped my, bang and pound into these weird things. Full text search in natural language mode and with query expansion. That was actually the default, and now they've actually just put a parameter into it. So if you said full text matching without any parameters, it actually did natural language. So it's not really a new feature; it's just a new kind of functionality, because now you can use the actual words as a keyword. Stored routines, so stored functions and stored procedures, now actually allow a definer. So you can specify who the definer should be. Instead of being the definer as automatically who you are, if you are like a super user, you can see the definer as this other thing. And you use that mostly when you're using SQL security definer or invoker. You can say SQL security definer, but if I'm root with a super, or if I'm a user with super privileges, I don't necessarily want SQL security definer to be me. I might want it to be, something else. New functionalities, part 3. Change master 2, you can now specify that you have to verify the server certificate if you're using SSL connections. Basically, this is so that replication between master and slave, you can prevent a man-in-the-middle attack. Or, between your client and server, a man-in-the-middle attack. But, so it will verify the SSL cert. Pad car to full length. So basically, by default, if you have a car column, C-H-A-R, the trailing spaces are trimmed, because it puts them in there in the database, and it will, when it takes stuff out, it takes out the trailing spaces. This could be a problem if you actually had trailing spaces, or if you had something like, say, somebody put space in the database, just the space, or 5 spaces. Maybe a user put something in, into a field, and it was space, 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 and the checker checked to see that it wasn't blank, and in fact it wasn't blank. There were 5 characters there, 5 spaces, and then it went to go put it in the car table, and it was fine. And then when it retrieved it, it was blank, and that was bad. This is, of course, all theoretical. It's never happened to me. Okay, it did. So it doesn't apply to varchar columns, and blah, blah, blah. It's in SQL mode, and it was added in 5.1.20. Long query time can now be set into microseconds, and you can also set it to 0. So setting this value to 0 causes all queries to be recorded in the slow query log.
But MySQL doesn't distinguish the time period is less than 1 second. So what?
I'm guessing in 5.1 it somehow does. Actually, I actually posted a blog post a while ago,
Time is
August 10th, apparently, on why you want to switch to MySQL 5.1. And this is Baron Schwartz said, table-based logging to the slow log reverts to 1 second granularity instead of microsecond precision, useless. Now that might be table-based logging versus file-based logging. I don't know why it would be different, but that's a good question to ask. Which, to my response, was how many people are actually using microslow? Not really that many. 95% of the people out there are not using microseconds. For the 5% that are, it's really important to keep it. Okay, part 4. That's the last part, I swear, for new functionalities. Log slow slave statements. Say that 5 times fast. It causes slow statements executed by a replication slave to be written to the slow query log, which apparently they didn't before. So it's a new feature. Min examined row limit can be used to cause queries that examine fewer than the stated number of rows not to be logged. So you have like log queries not using indexes. But you could say, you know what, if you're not looking at more than 1,000 rows, I don't want it in the slow query log. So that'll kind of get rid of all those spurious things that you might get from log queries not using indexes. EnoDB auto inc lock mode. So EnoDB actually does do entire table locking. It does it for a very short amount of time while it's getting the next auto increment number, which makes sense, right? Because you have to be like, okay, who gets I get the next number. It's a very very short amount of time, but if you have lots and lots and lots of things going on, you can actually get a lot of locking that way. So they say that the default behavior is now slightly different from before, which involves a minor incompatibility for multiple row inserts that specify an explicit value for the auto increment column in some, but not all rows. So, kind of useful. There's actually a section in the manual on it. You guys, oh, here we go. Look, and it's already been clicked by me today. Shocking. It didn't list it in like the incompatible changes sections. Yeah, so you could set lock mode parameters. So you get traditional lock mode is 0. Same behavior. A special table level auto lock is obtained and held to the end of the statement. For 1, which is consecutive lock mode, bulk inserts use the table level lock and hold it until the end of the statement, which is default lock mode. Right. It means that you're going to grab all the outer increments you need.
Which I thought was the way things were supposed to happen anyway. Instead of inserting 30 rows, and again, all I need the first outer increment value, the rest will be consecutive, I hope.
Right. Well, what this says is it does that to be safe,
yeah.
But it assures that increment values are consecutive, right? So for the 0 traditional lock mode, it's obtained and held at the end of the statement. Although gaps can exist within a table of a transaction that generated it is rolled back. So it's only provided for backward compatibility and performance testing. So those literally uses log mode unless you use mixed mode inserts. In other words, EnoDB and MySQL together, and care about the important differences semantics described later.
What's the default?
It is better scalability. The default right now is the traditional, but the default in the new one is this number 1, where it will get all of them and not have the gaps based on rollback. And then you've got interleaved lock mode, which is the non-safe way. Fastest and most scalable, but not safe when using statement-based replication or recovery scenarios. So there you go. Anyway.
Complex.
Yeah, it's a bit complex, definitely. So, some deprecated features. Show EnoDB status is show engine EnoDB status. That will generate a warning. Show mutex status is show engine EnoDB mutex.
Is it show EnoDB status the way you read your foreign key errors?
Show engine EnoDB status.
Okay.
That's how you should read it.
Okay.
They have removed show logs and show BDB logs. Basically, BDB doesn't exist, and show logs and show BDB logs are the same thing. They both show BDB logs. Part 2, type as a synonym for engine. In one of the early releases, they actually took away type equals blah. And then realized that, no, they couldn't quite take it away yet. So if you're creating a table and you say type equals MySQL, that will work. It will now get you a warning. Before, it didn't even get you a warning. What you need to say is engine equals MySQL. And similarly, @table_type should be @storage_engines or engine. Show table types should be show engines or show storage engines. So there you go. Skip thread priority option is now deprecated in 5.1. It's actually removed in 6.0. It's such that the server just won't change the thread priorities by default. In the manual it says giving threads different priorities might yield marginal improvements in some platforms where it actually works, but it might instead cause some significant degradation depending on the thread count and the number of processors. Meddling with thread priorities is not a safe bet, as it is very dependent on the behavior of CPU, scheduler, and the system where MySQL is being run. --log and --log slow queries are now deprecated. You want to use general_log and general_log_file, and slow query log and slow query log file. So you want to use general log instead of --log, and then general log file equals path to file. So instead of log equals path to file, you could say log, which just makes the logging turned on, or you could say log equals path to file. Now you use general log just to specify, okay, use the general log, and general log file, and the same with slow query log file. And here we go. Package changes. So, MySQL debug is now included in the package. It's no longer a separate package. Safe MySQLD is excluded, as we talked before. It was an alias to MySQLD safe, so you're not losing anything, but here's hoping your scripts don't use it. MySQL dump slow is now part of the server package, not the client package. This is because it relied on my_print_defaults, which is part of the server package. Most of us, I think, install server and client and probably shared compat or whatever as well, so it's probably not a big deal, but there you go. And MySQL cluster is a separate product. And this is the really, really important slide. It's slide 29 out of 30. There are some new collations. This is what you've all been waiting for. CP1250 Polish CI, UTF-8 Hungarian CI, and UCS2 Hungarian CI. Basically, CP1250 Polish CI is just a collation for the CP1250 character set. And the Hungarian ones support the correct sort order for Hungarian vowels, but not the correct order for sorting Hungarian consonant contractions. They expect to fix that in a future release.
Because Hungarian is a very difficult language.
All I know is, yeah, so this is the second to last slide, and the very last slide is this.